Hi, my name's Dr. Katherine Thompson. I'm a clinical social worker and I largely work with young people aged 12 to 25 years and adults, and I work with mission organisations. So I largely help people with mental health conditions, but I've also worked in research for a long period of time, researching some of the more serious mental health issues. This talk is going to be about anxiety, and we're going to talk about it from a Christian perspective and in a way that hopefully helps you understand what it feels like for people that suffer from anxiety. So, we're going to cover things like the signs and symptoms of anxiety, the different kinds of anxiety that you can have, factors that contribute to it, our different cultural understandings, and practical things that you can do to help. And there'll be resources at the end of this slideshow that you can actually buy or look up yourself. During this talk, there'll be times where if you're watching this with a group, you can actually stop the slideshow and have a discussion about some of the questions that I raise. You can also do a quiz, which is what we'll start with, and there's some YouTube videos that you can follow the link to and actually watch. So first up, I thought it would be really interesting to give you an idea of how many people in Australia have anxiety. So the government in Australia does a survey of mental health and well-being every few years, and so the last one that we've got statistics on is 2014-15, and at that time the population of Australia was around 23 million people. So that being the case, how many 15 to 64-year-old people do you think had a long-term mental health condition in that at that time? So you can discuss that amongst yourselves or just have a think about it. So what percentage and approximately how many people do you think? So you might be surprised that when the survey was done, it was something like 4 million people, or close to 18% of our population. So that's a lot of people. So what percentage of the total population had a mood disorder? So mood disorders include depression and bipolar disorder. So it was 9%. What percent of the total population had an anxiety disorder? So it's actually higher than depression. So anxiety is the most common of all the mental health conditions, and it came out to around 11%. It's actually 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men in a 12-month period that have anxiety in our country. And a lot of people don't realise that that's what they are struggling with. So anxiety and depression actually overlap with their symptoms, and so it's possible to have both at the same time. So the percentage of our population that have both comes out to 4.4%. So this is another survey that the government has conducted, and it's a bit old now. So it's the Mental Health and Wellbeing Survey from 2007. So I've picked this out, even though it's old data, because they've presented it in a different way. And what this actually tells us that in any 12-month period, 20% of our population, so that's 1 in 5 people, actually have a mental health condition. And in our lifetime, 1 in every 2 people will have some form of mental disorder. So it might be something that's quite common, like anxiety or depression, or it could be something more severe and less common, such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. So in any 12-month period, when they broke down the statistics at that time, anxiety disorders actually came out at 14.4%. So anxiety, depression and substance use are the most common mental health issues in our country. So I work with 12 to 25-year-olds, and one of the important questions you have to realise is what is different about this age group? And this age group is important because it's the peak period of onset of mental illness, and that's partly because of just normal human development. So 50% of mental health disorders emerge by the age of 14 years and 75% by 24 years. So in any 1 year, 1 in 4 young Australians experience at least one mental health disorder, and it's not uncommon to have more than one form of mental illness at the same time. So if mental health conditions are this common, we have to think about what our attitude to mental health problems are, because if 1 in every 2 of us are likely to have one in our lifetime, we really need to start thinking that this is not unusual and that we shouldn't be scared of it. So in mental health, we talk about stigma. Stigma is is based on fear. So the fear of people because we don't understand what they're going through. A lot of times with mental illness, people think that the other person might behave in an aggressive or unpredictable manner, but that's often not the case. So mental illness is not something you can see usually on the outside. So fear is one of the problems that we face. And seeing mental health problems as belonging to other people. So with the statistics, we can't really support that attitude because there's 50% chance that any one of us could have a mental illness in our lifetime. So these forms of health problems are not just for other people, they could be for us. And then we have our cultural and religious beliefs that can cause us to have some wrong attitudes to mental illness that actually stop us from understanding it properly. And we're going to talk about that a bit later. So we stigmatise people through ignorance, prejudice and discrimination. And I think as Christians we really need to think about, well, how does our faith inform the way we care for people and support them through these illnesses? And it's very relevant for anxiety. It is really important that as Christians we think about our fear and ignorance about some mental health issues like anxiety, and to really line up how we behave and what we think against the Bible, and particularly against how Jesus responded to other people. So I've given you some Bible passages here, which if you're with a group or by yourself, you can look up and think about more deeply. But Jesus had a holistic understanding of humanity, so it didn't separate people's mental or physical health. And so he healed no matter what the person came to him with. And so I think that is a healthier understanding of humanity, to not put a distinction between mental health and physical health. It's actually intertwined. James talks about not treating people with favouritism. So even though this passage in James chapter 2 is talking about the rich and poor, we can actually be discriminatory with people according to whether they're healthy or unhealthy. And I would encourage you to really challenge your own attitudes about mental illness and about treating people differently. We need to treat people the same way, with the same respect, and not be fearful. So if perfect love casts out fear, and we are called to love God and other people, we cannot be fearful and love them. We need to love them. That's what we're called to do. And Jesus calls us also to treat other people the way we want to be treated. So if 1 in 4 of us might have anxiety at any one time, I just wonder then, how would we want to be treated if we were anxious? And Jesus came specifically to bring good news, to proclaim release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, and to let the oppressed go free. And anxiety very much is one of the mental health conditions that chains people, and it stops them seeing life the way that they could. And I do believe that Christ wants us to be healed from this. But the way that we're healed might not be overnight. It might be a journey that takes time. But I do believe that in Christ we can receive healing. So what is anxiety? Anxiety is actually based on our body's normal stress response. So our body's wired so that when we're under threat, we either fight, which means we try to defend ourselves and protect ourselves, or we flight, which means that we run away. So it's designed to protect us. And God actually made us in an amazing way so that we have these systems built into us and we need them. But the problem is sometimes with anxiety, actually our interpretation of the stressful feelings can actually come a bit unstuck and create problems for us. Stress is one of the biggest contributors to anxiety. So when we get stressed, these are some of the symptoms that you might actually relate to in your body. And so a person that has anxiety will often report that this is the most distressing part of their anxiety as well. So they can feel all of these things when they're anxious. So that makes it intolerable for some people. And it's not uncommon for people to have trouble breathing or to have like constant headaches, muscle tension, even things like diarrhea, nausea, and they're really, really uncomfortable and hard to live with. So if you're in a group, you could pause and actually talk about these questions. So when would stress actually be helpful, do you think? And when could it be a problem? So anxiety is only a problem if the worry or fear becomes persistent or excessive and stops you from achieving your potential at school or work or in social relationships. So people usually describe it as fear or worry, and it can come in different forms, which we'll talk about in a minute. And so it's really about, yes, I feel stressed, but is the worry or fear to the point where it's actually impacting my life and stopping me from doing things? So there's different types of anxiety disorders. So panic disorder is one that is really uncomfortable but tends to last for 5 minutes. And so it's common for people to have a panic attack in their lifetime. That doesn't mean you have panic disorder necessarily. Agoraphobia is really problematic because it causes people often to withdraw from society and stay at home because they have a fear of certain situations. Social anxiety disorder comes in different forms. So it could be as simple as not liking people staring at you when you're in public, or it could be not eating when you go out for dinner or to a party with other people. And it could be a fear of being in a group of people. So it comes in different forms and it can be quite specific. It's usually based on a fear. Phobias are also based on fear, but they're a fear of a specific thing, like, for example, a fear of heights or a fear of spiders. But the fear gets to the point where it's actually interrupting the person's life. So it's not a normal level of fear, it's actually excessive. Generalized anxiety disorder is one of the most common forms of anxiety, and it's characterized by constant worry, and it can be paralyzing. Separation anxiety is common in children. It's not as common in adults, and you probably can recognize that. It's the fear of being separated from another person. So for little children, it would be a fear of being separated from their parents. So I've given you a link to a YouTube video, and it talks about what the physical signs and symptoms of anxiety feel like and the different characteristics. So if you want to pause this PowerPoint, you can actually look this link up and find the video. So anxiety can feel like all of these things. People talk about excessive sweating, headaches, being tense, being jumpy, trembling, shaking, being restless, and they can be teary, and it can be characterized by fear or worry. And it generally feels terrible. So one metaphor that we can use to describe what anxiety feels like is like a monster. And it's like a monster is always after you, trying to impact your life, trying to stop you doing things. And this terrifying monster is just because of a pattern that your body's got into that's somehow distorted your stress response so that it's become unhelpful, and it happens at times when it's not really protecting you anymore. It's just interrupting your life. Another way that you can describe anxiety is a bit like an avoidance loop. So if you imagine that you're driving your car, you can get to a point in a road where you see a detour sign and you have to make a choice about which way you're going to go. So if you are going to go on the detour, everyone knows that in a car that means that it's going to take longer to get to where you need to go. And likewise with anxiety, often it causes you to go on one of these detours or avoidance loops, and you spend a long time trying to manage the anxiety, and it interrupts your life, and it's a whole lot of time that you could have used doing something else. So the better way might have been to go straight ahead and not go on the detour if you're driving, and that would take you to where you want to go without that interruption. So this is another video that you can look up on YouTube called Snowballing Worries, and it gives you a really good idea of what generalized anxiety disorder feels like for someone. And it's a guy sharing his story, personal story about what it was like for him and how it impacted his life and his work. And then he talks a little bit about how he got out of that situation and what helped him. So now that you've watched those YouTube links and I've explained a bit about anxiety, you can stop now and think, what kind of things do people actually avoid? And how would you know if it was anxiety or just some other reason for it? And when would the person actually need help? What might anxiety look like in a child? So you can stop and discuss those amongst yourselves. So there's different factors that contribute to anxiety, and they're pretty obvious, some of them. A family history of anxiety. So many mental health issues have a genetic component, so we tend to pass them down through families. But that just because you have a parent or a sibling with a mental illness does not follow that you are going to have one yourself, because it's not that simple. You have to have the genetic predisposition, but also other factors for it to actually come out in your life. So other things can be partly your personality, so being perfectionistic, wanting to control everything, feeling bad about yourself and being timid, so you're not likely to take risks, having excessive amounts of stress due to different changes in your life. It could just be a work issue, but that can be enough to cause anxiety. Physical health problems can also feed into it. And the reason for that is that if you have a chronic health problem, you might feel like you've got hardly any control over your life. So it sort of follows that that might be an issue. So you could stop and have a think about, well, with myself or with the people around me, do I see any of those things that could be a problem in them? And what might I actually want to change? So for myself, I think that the amount of stress that I am happy to live with, that is something I can control. And so that is something I actively try to reduce in my life so that I am protected from things like anxiety. So I thought, as your church congregation is very multicultural, that it's probably worth thinking about, well, what does our culture actually tell us about anxiety? Because up to this point, I've only been talking from a Western medical point of view, and it is very Western. So many countries in the world, we don't actually use the label anxiety, but it still is actually the same thing. So you might recognise in this slide some of these concepts depending on what culture you're from. So a lot of cultures actually attribute anxiety to a physical illness. But when you think about our stress response, the symptoms that are associated with these different cultural understandings actually match that stress response picture that we talked about a few minutes ago. And it's also interesting to me that different cultures have specific fears about different things. And so I wonder what the differences between us might be with our fears and what we actually worry about. So if you're with a group or doing this with another person, I want you to stop and think about the ways that you've heard people talk about anxiety. How does your culture understand anxiety, and how would you describe it? So even with different age groups, there's a difference in how we talk about mental health. With my particular family, if you go up to my parents' generation, they're in their 70s and 80s now, that they actually still stigmatise mental health problems heavily. And even though in my family, if I look back through the generations, we have a history of particularly depression in our family, that we probably still don't talk about it very openly. I think it's only my age group and my son's generation, he's 18, that now openly talk about anxiety. And when I think about even my close friends, that they might not recognise that they have anxiety, and it may be a constant struggle for them. So it's something that we need to really think about, and it actually helps to be able to openly talk about it. Even though there can be shame and stigma, if we keep it quiet and hide it, then it creates a lot of silent suffering for people that's unnecessary, and then they go unsupported and uncared for. And they carry a weight of shame that they don't need to, because this is actually the same as having diabetes or heart disease or any number of other physical conditions. You can actually measure on this questionnaire, the DAS, what your severity of depression, anxiety, or stress is. You can actually look this up on the internet by just putting the DAS into Google. And it's not a diagnostic test, but it actually asks you about the questions that are relevant to the symptoms of anxiety, depression, and stress. So it teases out the difference between the three concepts. So I'd encourage you, if you're at all concerned, you could actually look that up. And it actually gives you a way of understanding the score that you get. And so you can see whether the problem's normal, within the normal range, which means it's not an issue, or whether it's mild, moderate, severe, extremely severe. So if you did this test on yourself or another family member, it might give you an indication about whether you need to get some help or not. So what can we actually do to help ourselves and help other people? So there's lots of practical things you can do. So our body is made for balance. So when we are stressed, we need to restore the balance, which means that you need to spend a lot more time trying to rest. So the more stressed we are, the more rest we need in order to create balance in our body. And that will protect us from all sorts of mental health and physical health conditions. And the way we can do that is to encourage people and ourselves to look after our health. So for mental health, the basic things that we recommend for people is to have regular sleep. So regular sleep means to have a routine before bed that's consistent every day. So the 1 hour before you go to bed, you need a consistent routine, which might be to read a book, to have a shower, to brush your teeth. It might be to pray. You might do a relaxation exercise, and then you might go to sleep. So you need to do the same consistent thing every day. And you need to go to bed at the same time each day and wake the same time each morning. And that actually regulates your sleep pattern. So the second thing here is a healthy diet. Often if we're stressed, we're tempted, or anxious, we're tempted to eat lots of sugar or fried food and lots of carbohydrates. So a healthy diet, which helps your mood, might reduce the amount of sugar you eat. It might mean that you don't drink lots of Diet Coke or drink lots of tea and coffee with caffeine in it. It might mean eating more vegetables and eating a healthier diet. So it just stops you from getting those real rapid changes in your mood that are related to what we eat. And the third one there is exercise. So exercise helps because if you exercise, you actually get rid of a lot of the chemicals your body creates when you're stressed. And another byproduct of that is that you release endorphins in your brain, which make you feel good. And your body naturally does that every time you exercise. When you think about it from a biblical perspective, God's actually built in a day of rest for us, and it's up to us whether we follow it or not. But we actually do need to rest. So setting aside 1 day per week where you stop and you don't actively do things all day, you actually take time to reflect and think and to slow down. That can actually help you if you've got anxiety or if you're just stressed. And there's two types of relaxation exercises that can help bring your body back into balance. So one of those is a breathing exercise, and there's many breathing exercises you can just find on the internet. And they just work on your body's physical need for that restoration of balance between work and rest. So slowing your breathing down actually slows all of your body down at the same time. You can also achieve the same thing by relaxing your muscles. And I thought today what I would do is actually talk you through a muscle relaxation exercise. So if you're watching this on your own, you can do it now with me. If you're doing it in a group, you can actually all do it together. So it's up to you whether you want to do it right now. So what I want you to do is you can either sit or you can lay down. And I want you to shut your eyes and I want you to just notice what you can hear around you. I want you to focus on the sounds so that you keep your attention during this exercise. And then I want you to bring your focus into yourself a little bit more. I want you just to focus on your breathing. Focus on the rise and fall of your chest as you breathe in and out. So we're trying to channel your concentration to one thing. And now that you're a bit more still, I want you to focus on your face. I want you to pay attention to all the muscles in your face. Any muscles that are tense, I want you to try to relax them until they're completely limp and relaxed. A lot of people find that when they're stressed, they hold their stress in their jaw. You might have tension in another part of your face. I want you to pay close attention and try to persevere until it's completely relaxed. And then I want you to focus on your head and the back of your neck. And I want you to try to relax that part of your body. With your neck, sometimes if you pull your chin in ever so slightly, it means that your neck will relax a lot better. So you can try doing that now. Try to change your posture so that your neck is relaxed. And then go back to your face, your head and neck and relax all of those parts of your head at the same time. And the next part of your body is your shoulders. To relax your shoulders, you actually need to slide your shoulder blades down the middle of your back. But don't force them, actually just relax them. So you're sitting a bit squarer in your seat, or maybe if you're lying down, you're actually just got your shoulders in a slightly more relaxed and comfortable position. And I want you to completely relax the muscles in your shoulders. So once again, this is a part of your body that most people tense when they're stressed, and if they have anxiety, it's also one of the main parts that they tense up, and it can stop you breathing properly. It can actually affect your ability to speak. And some people talk about how their neck is tight. So try to really relax your shoulders now. And then go back to your face, your head, your neck, your shoulders, and relax all of those parts of your body at the same time. And then go to your arms and hands, I want you to move them into a position where you don't have to hold them in a tense way. So try to completely relax them. And then go back to your face, your head, your neck, your shoulders, arms and hands, and keep all of those parts of your body relaxed at the same time. The next part of your body I want you to relax are your legs and feet. So just notice any tension in those areas and move them until they're in a position where you can keep them completely relaxed. And then go back to your face, your head, your neck, your shoulders, arms, hands, legs and feet, and keep all those parts relaxed at the same time. You can actually stay in this position and keep focusing on your body for 5 or 10 minutes if you wish. And you'll notice that as you do, your breathing actually gets slower because you're getting more relaxed as you do it. The trick though is to keep focused on your body, because your mind will actually start to get distracted the longer you sit here, and you need to keep bringing your awareness back to your body and noticing the muscle tension, and keep persevering to relax the muscles. So the more you persevere with this skill, the better you will be at relaxing your body. I'm going to bring you out of the exercise now. I want you to do the opposite to how we started. I want you to just notice what you can hear around you. Notice all the different sounds. And then when you're ready, I want you to open your eyes and get used to your surroundings again. And you'll probably notice when you open your eyes that you actually became quite relaxed just doing it for a few minutes. So I encourage you, if you need to relax, if you have anxiety, or if you're just in a period of high stress, to actually practice doing this exercise. So there's lots of other practical things you can do. So it's really important to stay connected to other people. So that means maybe possibly even making yourself vulnerable and sharing with the people you trust that you're struggling at the moment. But you need to be with other people so that you can get support if you're anxious. And they can help you in lots of ways. They can help encourage you if you're finding something difficult, or if you're finding it hard just to go out of your house. Friends and family can be a great source of encouragement. And of course, if you have Christian friends and your church family, you can get them to pray for you. And that can be a real source of encouragement if you're anxious. So when we read about the sort of life that Jesus lived, even though he was often surrounded by crowds of people, he would take time out and withdraw and be by himself and pray. And I think this is an amazing thing we have with our Christian faith, is this discipline that we can put into action of being still before God. So there's different ways we can do this. We can pray with our mind, or we can pray in a more meditative way, which is in a contemplative way. We can meditate on scripture and read the Bible, and we can actually sit in silence before God. And these are actually spiritual disciplines. So depending on your background and what you've learned already in your life, you might not have been exposed to some of these. And that's because they're not widely practiced in some churches. Historically, it's because 500 years ago, when we did have these disciplines, we sort of forgot about them, because in Western culture, we went through the period of enlightenment and decided that thinking with our mind was more important than sitting and focusing on things and engaging in contemplative prayer. So in more recent times, writers like Dallas Willard have challenged people to reclaim these practices. So you can look up his books if you're interested, or Richard Foster also talks about spiritual disciplines, and you can find things that can help you be still. So I thought that I would actually teach you an activity which is based on Christian contemplative practice. And it's actually in my book if you're interested. And I think the book that Janet's got for you has a version which uses a mustard seed, but you can do it with other things like salt. So at this point, if you're doing it with a group or by yourself, we're actually going to do the exercise now. So to do the exercise, you need to get some salt, and it's probably better if you use rock salt, and then take a little bit of it in your hand. So everyone needs to have some in the palm of their hand to do the exercise. So if you need to, take a moment to do that. And I don't want you to shut your eyes this time. I want you instead to focus your attention to the palm of your hand. I want you to put the salt there. And I want you, through this exercise, to continue to focus on the salt in the palm of your hand. Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot." As you look at the salt, notice the different sizes of the crystals, how the light shines through and within them. Notice the different colours and shades. Use your other hand and your finger to touch the salt and feel the texture. What does it feel like? Hold the salt up to your nose. Can you smell anything? And now I want you to place a couple of grains of salt on the tip of your tongue. I want you to let it sit there without swallowing it. Notice how this triggers the saliva in your mouth. Notice the way the salt tastes. Which part of your tongue do you taste it with? When you're ready, you can swallow the salt. Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot." Take a moment to reflect on what Jesus said and how you think it applies to your life. If you're in a group, you can actually end with a prayer together as you feel led. I'm going to do another exercise with you now. This one's a little different. And just like with the muscle relaxation exercise, I want you to shut your eyes this time. So if you're in a group, you can still do this together. Some people are actually uncomfortable with shutting their eyes, so you could do this just staring at a spot on the carpet or the floor or the table in front of you, and that's still okay. You just need to focus on something. And I want you to imagine in your mind a large tree with its roots stretched into the ground, its trunk and branches and leaves reaching up into the sky. In Jeremiah 17:7-8, it says, "Blessed are those who trust in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord. They shall be like a tree planted by the water, sending out its roots by the stream. It shall not fear when heat comes, and its leaves shall stay green. And in the year of drought it is not anxious, and it does not cease to bear fruit." So keep your focus on that tree in your mind. I want you to plant your feet firmly on the ground. Imagine that they are roots that are connected to God, the one who provides living water to you. He sustains you and provides life through this water, no matter how harsh and difficult your surroundings might be in your life. Then I want you to imagine that your body is the trunk of the tree. Place your hands on the lower part of your rib cage and breathe all the air slowly out of your lungs until you feel uncomfortable, and then let go, and a reflex will automatically refill your lungs. I want you to repeat this a few times with some deep breaths. So continue to breathe all of the air out of your lungs very slowly until it's uncomfortable, and then let them refill on their own, and continue to do it for a couple more breaths. And then I want you to extend your focus to your surroundings. So I want you to reach out to the world around you like the branches and leaves of a tree extending upwards. I want you to notice what you can hear first of all. What can you touch or feel on your skin? Is there anything you can taste and smell? I want you to open your eyes and notice what you can see around you. And then I encourage you to go about the rest of your day fully engaged with everything around you, while keeping an awareness of God's sustaining presence in each moment of your life. So we've covered a lot of things about anxiety today, and a lot of what we've talked about actually can be applied to times when you're really stressed as well. And I've given you here some tips about what you can do if you are concerned. So Beyond Blue, which is an Australian organisation that helps people with anxiety and depression, has a lot of fact sheets, also has a lot of quizzes and other information that you can use if you want to find out more about anxiety. You can also try to speak to a family member or friend if you're concerned about your own mental health or maybe about theirs. You can ask your GP for a referral to a counsellor under a mental health plan. And there's some books that you can read on the subject, which we've given to you in the next slide. And if you want to do something that's more consistent with your faith, which encourages you to be still, and you want something that actually can help with your anxiety a little bit, I recommend that you have a look at my book. And on my website, which I've put here, you can actually download some audio MP3s onto your phone. So you can do some of these exercises we did at the end by yourself at home. So the different books that I recommend, many of the best ones are actually not Christian books, and they actually give you some really practical advice about how to help yourself if you're stressed or anxious. But there's also some really good Christian ones. There, Hind's Feet in High Places is a bit like Pilgrim's Progress, and it actually uses allegory and story to talk about our Christian faith journey. But the main character is called Much Afraid, and she has anxiety, and it talks about how Christ leads her to a place of healing. I found that book personally very encouraging. And then for kids, there's also lots of great picture books, and I've just given you a couple of really good ones that you can talk to primary school children about. Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening to me. And I just encourage you and your church family to be open with each other about anxiety, and to try and support each other, and to try to destigmatise this really common form of mental illness, which can be quite debilitating and shaming if you have to suffer by yourself. So I hope you've enjoyed today's talk, and that it will encourage you to think a bit differently about anxiety. Thank you.